All right.
Easy on me.
So I get to play the prosecuting attorney here. I'd like to begin with my 5 arguments, and then we can end, if I have time, on your 3 arguments. I noticed that you have not replied yet to my fine-tuning argument, to the argument on the resurrection of Jesus, and to the appeal to immediate experience. Is that right? Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about your reply to the origin of the universe argument, the cosmological argument. I gave 2 arguments for the second premise that the universe began to exist. One was a philosophical argument, and one was a scientific argument. Now, you haven't responded yet to my philosophical argument. Is that right?
Remind me what that was.
That was the one based on the impossibility of the existence of an actual infinite. Remember the infinite number of things in your sister's basement?
Actually, it wasn't junk in my sister's basement. It was my books.
Your books, yeah. Okay.
And I do have an infinite number of books.
You do?
See, there's...
Where in the world do you put them?
She's got a large basement.
Yeah, an infinite number of books, of course, would occupy an infinite amount of space, which would have interesting cosmological implications. Well, I would be interested in hearing how you would respond to the argument against the existence of the actual infinite, if you can do that in your next speech. Let me go on to what you did say about the Big Bang Theory. Here you suggested that I wasn't expert in the area, and that therefore you were dubious of what I was saying. Now, you would agree that Alexander Vilenkin is expert in this area, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think he expertly disagrees with you.
Well, Vilenkin was the gentleman I quoted in my first speech who said, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning." Now, do you think Professor Vilenkin, who's an eminent cosmologist at Tufts University, is mistaken in what he says here?
Well, you know, I can only fall back on the problems that I have is I'm not really qualified to talk as a physicist. The truth of the matter is that they could say anything to me, and I think I'd pretty much accept it. The problem I raised there is not so much as your expertise. I actually don't know very much about it. I'm guessing a degree in theology doesn't really give you a good grounding in physics, though I'm sure you can read as widely as you like in the area. My concern is that it seems to me that physicists are actually doing research that kind of presupposes that the way you've laid out the absolute beginning of the universe, its creation out of nothing, can't possibly be correct.
Well, let's talk about that then. You quoted, for example, Paul Steinhardt and Neil Turok's work on ekpyrotic cyclical models. Isn't it the case that Alexander Vilenkin, with Alan Guth and Arvind Borde, developed this theorem for the past finitude of the universe, specifically in an application to Steinhardt's model, showing that it cannot be infinite in the past?
I'd have to beg off on that.
Well, take a look at Paul Steinhardt's website, where I think you'll find this admitted. And as for Alan Guth, you mentioned his work on inflationary cosmology. This theorem that I quoted was developed by Alan Guth, along with Arvind Borde and Alexander Vilenkin. So that Guth himself says inflationary models cannot be extended into the infinite past. So why did they continue doing research on that? Well, let me ask you this. Isn't it the case that we have not yet discovered a quantum theory of gravity, a theory that would unify the 4 forces of nature into a quantum gravity theory?
That's true.
And so wouldn't this be an incentive to pursue further research?
Sure.
And wouldn't it also be the case that when a scientist proposes a theory, he will list conditions that would serve to falsify that theory in hopes that those experiments would fail and thereby corroborate his theory? So isn't it the case that theorists who believe that the universe had a beginning will continue to pursue research aimed at attempting to falsify their models?
That'd be a good idea.
Okay. Let's talk about objective moral values. You made some vague comments here, but I'm not sure where you stand yet, Dr. Williamson. I would agree with you when you said that we can all agree on something, and that's not objective. I defined objective to mean valid and binding whether anybody believes in it or not. For example, to say the Holocaust was objectively wrong would be to say that even if the Nazis had won World War II and brainwashed or exterminated everybody who disagreed with them, it would still have been wrong, even if nobody held that. Now, would you agree that if God doesn't exist, then moral values aren't objective in that way?
That's what I'm lacking, is I don't see what your argument is between God's existence and the existence of objective values.
Well, then let me put the question a different way. You said we have another source for morality. If God does not exist, if God is dead, as Nietzsche said, then what other source for objective moral values is there that would stave off the kind of moral nihilism that Nietzsche predicted?
Well, my suggestion there, well, let me try and put it this way. I was interested in what you wanted to give us in the way of a demonstration that there actually is an objective morality out there. And it seems to me you relied on something that was effectively consensus. Now, how do we know from all of the beliefs about morality that human beings actually hold, what ones are actually independent of their holding those?
All right, now what I hear you saying now is that it sounds to me like you are skeptical that objective moral values exist.
What I'm asking is, it seems to me that the claim that objective morality exists deserves some kind of an account that would actually meet your definition.
But I would like to know what you think. I mean, which of these two premises do you disagree with if you disagree with the conclusion? Which premise is false?
Well, I think the trouble is that's going to take us far afield. But I would say I accept an objective morality. The trouble is I think I would want to put some constraints on what objectivity means. It seems to me objectivity is perfectly good as an idea of consensus within human societies.